Welcome back, everybody, and this, as I present to you now, my 5th podcast. And this time around, we got some more special guests for you. Presenting my best friend, Uncle Don here. He's going to be talking about all of his travels and giving some advice to some of you would-be travelers or those thinking about it. But besides that, I got a load of news, new videos, games, weather, all the fun stuff that you know I'm going to plug into this thing. So, this is one podcast you really don't want to miss, especially if you're an adventurer like me, a traveler of any sorts, and looking forward to going on some foreign escapades, guys. So, don't miss this one, and if you do, you're a terrible person, no one ever liked you, and you were adopted. And welcome back to my 5th podcast, actually. And I have another special guest because I'm just loaded with these special guests coming in left and right. My best buddy, Uncle Don. Uncle Don.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. Anyway, with the regular news that I have all kinds of updates to lay about to everybody. So, starting with my newest releases of my Fallout gaming play. Now, I've just recently published several videos featuring the glowing sea, which by all means is a pain in the butt, that one was. But I have a ton coming out, because I love Fallout 4, if you hadn't noticed. So I'm all about just flooding everything with that. So, also I have a special one, Merlin. Yes, you heard right. I've been wanting to play it for a long time, so I figured why not? Retro gaming's coming back, but this one is going to be called something different, but it's featuring Merlin, so I'll be playing that one and giving some commentary on whatnot, and you're going to be watching the misery that I have to face in this game, because if you've played Skyrim and you've played Fallout 4, or just Skyrim in general, or even Oblivion, because Oblivion's awesome, by the way, you'll know that Merlin is leaps and bounds below both of those. So, coming from those guys, yeah, it's gonna be a doozy. And, as I already hinted earlier on, retro gaming, where I'm gonna be featuring and playing all sorts of old classic games that I can grab my hands on and find. So, you guys gotta check that out. And I'll have buddies playing with me, other special guests that will be doing this, so you do not want to miss any of those coming up. Also, my top 6, I'm working on it as we speak. I still have other videos I've been working on for a long time now, like The Order, which I don't know if it's going to be permanently canceled or what I'm going to do with that, but I had to rewrite some stuff and get some new techniques going on. So that one's been, postponed for, not indefinite, but it's been postponed for a protracted amount of time. Then also, as I was saying earlier, I have assortments of games coming out, and you don't want to miss those. So, with that being said, the new games that I have acquired as of late, which Merlin, ding 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 ding, that's one if you hadn't already guessed it, because I got the Game of the Year one, and I'm about it. I'm burning it up as we speak. Also, another game a lot of you might not have ever heard of, Seek and Destroy. It's an old PlayStation 2 game, which is really weird. The controls are interesting, and it's really fun once you get past the obnoxious control systems, the pain in the butt guidances, and lack of directions thereof. But watch my video on it, check it out, tell me what you think, and we'll go from there. Also, if anybody hasn't already heard about it, because I have been in the dark for 1,000 years, Hoonie Pop. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you're a gamer and you already know this game, you already know what it's about. But I'm not doing a let's play on that one. But for references, if anybody likes any sort of animation of that sort, gaming, dating simulators and stuff, that is relatively fun and softcore. So, if you know any of that, you're good. That's all I'll say on that one. So, besides that, I also got a hold of Homeworld Collection. It was on sale, so I grabbed it. I love Homeworld series. If you never played them, it's a resource. Well, it's an RTS for the most part, but it's a X3, I guess you would say, or E3. Or, I don't know exactly how you would say it. You exploit, you explore, you build, and you work on your economy and build massive fleets. You're in space. You're on a hive world. Your world's been lost, supposedly, not to ruin the story. But you build massive fleets, you gotta defend yourself, and you expand. And it is really, really fun. So, if you ever get a chance, and it's a space game. So, it's been digitally remastered. and they have all three of them. There are 3 of these games. I used to have them, but they don't work on the PCs no more. So, if you see it, get it. It's really fun, especially if you like real-time strategy games. Though that is one of the best ones. Also, with that being said, to the weather. Well, today, Aaron, the weather has been quite bright and sunny and humid as fuck. Yesterday we had rain, and the day before that, humidity and sun. So, with that being said, it's been any other summer day. So, good time to stay indoors, right? I think so. Also, as I love to do in this section here, I am going to plug in. I'm still in dire need, absolute, positively desperate need for somebody to do some artwork. Possibly even I'd like to get some music talent. If anybody has any, chipping in, wants to, contribute and wants some accreditation or whatever, hey, right here, need some chill music, just anything would do. Just hit me up. That'd be great. We'll talk. Editing, also, I doubt I'm going to find an editor, but I prefer to edit myself half the time, and obviously I'm learning, and that's why I like doing it. But needless to say, it wouldn't hurt on the time scale of things. It would help me get things together, and any contributions would be greatly appreciated on that regard. And the best section of them all, the discussions and thoughts section, which I'm actually going to be interviewing this time around, as opposed to throwing out some general questions and getting two-way responses. With me, Uncle Don now. He is a veteran traveler and world extraordinaire, and I'm going to be asking him all sorts of questions. So if there's anybody out there that listens and has any, interest in traveling and stuff, this is the particular podcast you yourself would enjoy. So, starting off with the first question I have here. So, Don, what all countries have you actually traveled to in your lifespan?
Well, I've been to 70 countries. Do you want me to list them all?
Oh, man, no. All right, well, we'll break this one down. He's been to 70 countries. All right, what about the ones that you've particularly, let's say the ones you stayed in the longest?
Well,
top 5.
I was in the military, so therefore that added a lot to my travels because they sent me all over the world. The only continent I really didn't visit was Antarctica. So I got to go to all the other... I have to correct that. I was never in Australia either. Yeah, so I missed those. But I spent 2 years in Asia, primarily in Southeast Asia, because there was little conflict going on then.
Oh, yeah.
And my country, interestingly enough, was Laos. And most people, even when the war was going on back in the 1960s and 70s, they didn't know where Laos was.
Right.
And it was a country that shouldn't have existed in the first place, so no one really cared about it except for those of us that were over there. But I spent 2 years involved with Laos right along the Mekong River, and that was very interesting because it was my first overseas experience.
Really?
And I learned a lot about culture and appreciating culture from that one time there.
And when was this exactly, if you don't mind me inquiring? Like, when did you actually go?
From 1971 to 1973.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a
whole different world.
It was a different world, and both years I was in 2 different locations, and they were totally different experiences. The first year was probably the most enjoyable because everything was new.
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't matter what I ran into or what I saw, it was a new experience. And that's where I learned, and that's going to be, I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later on, the importance of appreciating a different culture and trying to assimilate as much as you can into that culture while you're in their country.
Right.
The other country that I was in overseas for a number of years was the Netherlands. And again, a lot of people may not even know where that is because you think it's Holland. Most people call it Holland, but Holland is actually actually 2 provinces in the Netherlands. And I was in the most southern province, which was called Limburg. I'd like to call it the Dutch Alps. Their highest point in the Netherlands was in our area, and I think it was 328 meters, so about a little less than 1,000 feet in altitude. So it wasn't really the Alps at all. But it was a coal mining district. Now the coal mines had shut down, and there was a lot of unemployment because the coal mines had shut down. But the government had a program for those that had been knocked out of work, so that they were not starving to death, but they were being taken care of. But I got to know the old coal miners because I lived out in the community.
Right.
Rather, there was no base as such, and so I really enjoyed the Netherlands. I was there for 4 years, and I go back very often.
So, just for a reference for people to understand, Laos, referring back to, it's located in Southeast Asia, correct? What
Yes.
countries is it adjacent to for some of those that don't have the geography on their minds?
Okay, well, going along Laos's east border would be Vietnam. And of course, when I was there was North Vietnam and South Vietnam.
Right.
To the south is Cambodia. And then to most of the western border would be Thailand. And then up to the very north, there's a little bit of Burma and then China.
Gotcha.
So you've got a number of countries that it borders into.
A lot of neighbors.
It was created by the French, but primarily as a buffer state between the British influence coming from Burma. Thailand, by the way, was influenced by the British, but it was never a colony. The word Thai, by the way, means free, so Thailand is the land of the free.
Ah, okay. Did not know
The
that.
old name was Siam, but they changed the name because it was never colonized, and they're very proud of that. But they were heavily influenced by the British. But the French were concerned about the British moving in to Vietnam, so Laos was like a buffer state between the two. There is a indigenous group of people called Blackaux, where the name comes from. They are different from the Vietnamese. Even the religion, even though it's Buddhist, is slightly different. They have a form of Buddhism that is peaceful, and they don't really...
They're not part of the Buddhist sect that likes to be the extreme ones that like to set themselves apart.
No, that was in Vietnam. That's what I was getting ready to say.
Okay.
They're very different. And what they had in Laos was called Theravada Buddhism. And it's a very peaceful type of Buddhism. And they're very tolerant, by the way. In fact, you can be a Catholic or a Protestant and also still be a Buddhist. The Buddhists don't care.
Okay.
So they're very open to that, and they don't find that a conflict.
Right.
So,
Cool. And now going back to the Netherlands, that country, now if I'm correct on my geography, it's in Europe, obviously.
Yes.
But it is north of France for some of those, like the general area, it's north of
Right.
France and like east,
well,
west of Germany, isn't it?
It is west of Germany. Most of its border is with Germany on its eastern border, and then to the south would be Belgium,
Right.
and then that's it. Luxembourg, interestingly enough, and Belgium were at one time part of the Netherlands.
Huh.
And I like to kid the Belgians. I hope there's no Belgians listening. But they like to say, well, we became independent in 1830. And I said, yeah, only because the Dutch kicked you out and the French wouldn't accept you. And Belgium is still having issues over language and over that. But we were really near the Belgian border, so I was in Belgium a lot.
Right. And the English Channel is their north buff as a
the channel is.
Did you have a lot of excursions over towards England? In that
I went
sense?
over to England about 4 times in that year. I've been to England a lot.
Right.
When I lived over there in Europe, it was easy to get to. And the airport, our nearest international airport was Maastricht. Now, some of you, if you have been paying attention, may have heard of the Maastricht Treaty, which helps settle some of the issues dealing with the EU.
Right.
But Maastricht is right at the where Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands all kind of meet. It's really right on the border.
Gotcha.
But they have an international airport, and so you could hop on Virgin I guess they just called it Virgin. It wasn't Virgin Atlantic, and fly over to England, and so it was easy to get to.
Or you could take like a boat across too.
And I took the boat several times.
Don't they have like a tunnel? Or is
They
that
do now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
they
that
do
was back in the. Now, for reference and time period, that was back when.
Now, when I was in Europe, living in Europe, it was in the 1980s, from 1983 to 1987.
So you still had the Soviet Union on the east end
Yes.
as well, and you still had that whole.
And at
energy
that time, I was in NATO, and I know a lot of people think NATO was no action, talk only. We all know that's different now because they've been heavily involved in Afghanistan and Iraq, but the member countries have been. But I enjoyed NATO, and that's another area where I learned to appreciate the opinions and the viewpoints of other countries, and also to appreciate their cultures.
Right.
Because even though...
Because you had to work with them too, didn't you?
Well, yeah.
You had to be always corresponding
My
with each other.
immediate boss was Canadian. The boss over him was a general from Great Britain. And then we finally got to an American.
Well,
He
that's
was a
pretty
two-star general.
Ah, well, I know I'm deviating a little bit, but that's an interesting point you make. The cohesion, like it worked out pretty well. You say, like in the organization of like from the top ranks, you as an American accepting orders from a Canadian or a different
I will tell you
nationality and
that
such.
the Canadian boss that I had, was the best supervisor I had in my 24 years in the military.
Wow.
Because he actually had to lead through example,
Yeah.
and not through threats.
Right.
So
right.
it was a little. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from him.
Right. So yeah. So the nationality didn't affect anything, or the
No,
or,
in fact, when I went over there to initially, I thought there were 6 countries in our headquarters. At that time, NATO had 15 members, but our headquarters had only 6 countries represented, and because it was a central region.
Right.
And so the 6 countries were the Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, and then Canada, Great Britain, and the United States.
Right.
So I thought my friends would all be the English speakers. The Canadians, well, they could be speaking French too, but the Canadians, the Brits, and myself, or the U.S. And so what ended up and totally surprised me was that I became closest to the Dutch. Now all the Dutch could speak English, so that made it fairly easy.
A whole lot easier, yeah.
And to the Germans. I really like the Germans.
Right.
And so I didn't expect that.
Right, yeah. Going into it, you figured you'd be more associated to the same languages and culture of your own.
When I was mentioning my level, I forgot I did have a German colonel above. Okay, we went from Canada to Germany to Great Britain, then to the U.S.
Gosh.
And this German colonel that we worked for, he was also outstanding. He did not fit the stereotype that we think of Germans at all. And I became really good friends. I'm still friends. I'm still in touch with him, even though it's been a number of years. He lives in Munich now. And he very much respected me, and I respected him as well. But one of my favorite stories with this German colonel, if I would write something, he would always, it would go up through the chain to be published or whatever. And if there was something that was wrong, or he did not understand it, here he would come into my office, and he would sit down by my desk, and he would put his hand on his forehead and start out, "Now I know I'm just a dumb German, and English is your language, but," and then I knew it was coming, whatever the but was, and invariably he was right. And what happened was he would, we get sloppy with our language.
Right.
Because we grew up with it. We have,
familiar with it.
We're very familiar with it. We don't always use it correctly. And so he had to learn English, because that was the language spoken at the headquarters, after he was already in the military just about. And so he would look up words and that I would simply be writing, and he would, if he didn't understand them, he would look them up. And if the definition was not really very clear, or if his definition didn't fit with my words, then, and he would come and he would catch me. Also at NATO, my English really got better.
Yeah.
I learned not to split infinitives or to have dangling participles. And prior to that job, I really didn't know what a dangling participle was.
Hey, same here. I have no earthly idea
well,
what it is.
when you work for a British brigadier general who that was his big thing, were dangling participles and split infinitives, boy, my writing got very good.
I bet.
So he seems to think that general thought it was his language. I don't know.
Right. Well, jumping on there, I noticed we got on a tangent, but that's great because it still it really showcases the idea of, like, traveling, interspersing with other cultures and such. But so out of all the places, what is your favorite place of all time that you've traveled to? Like, as it doesn't necessarily have to be work, but just a place you've traveled to and you enjoyed it thoroughly.
Well, obviously Europe is a place I go to a lot because I enjoy it.
Right.
Of the countries of Europe, I definitely like Germany, and that's pretty obvious. Although it's kind of interesting, I only know Germany from Cologne south. I don't even need a map for the roads. I've been over there so many times. Wow. But say from Dusseldorf north going up towards Denmark, I have been there, but I'm not as familiar with the northern part of Germany. I like southern Germany, Bavaria, all that. Right. The most beautiful countries in Europe, I have to claim Austria. It has it right now of all the countries I've seen, and their Alps are more beautiful than the Swiss Alps.
Oh yeah,
and I think the Swiss Alps are perhaps a little bit more rugged, and you don't have the vistas that you have in Austria. So Austria wins the beauty award.
Well, I'm glad we got that award out.
Yeah. Asia, I spent some time over there. I enjoyed it, but I think I don't have any great desire to go back to Asia anymore. Right. I know you do, but I don't. If somebody offers me a ticket, I'll go.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, if you had to go on your own notion, it would be otherwise.
Right. I would prefer going to Europe, and I didn't mention it, but of course I was in the Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. And that was interesting.
Oh, yes.
Very interesting. That was in 1981. And then I went back in 1999, and I was amazed to see the differences. So I'm glad I had some comparisons, but I wouldn't say that was one of my favorite places.
So, Uncle Don, if you had the choice to live anywhere in the world, what country would you choose to live in, aside from the United States, if you couldn't live here no more?
This is a hard one because I've been to so many places, but the one that I probably would enjoy living in the most is Canada. I have been to every province in Canada except Labrador, Newfoundland. That's one province.
Right.
And it's a beautiful country. They have maintained they've taken care of the land, and the people are friendly, and I just like the Canadians. And it's very similar to the United States, so there wouldn't be very much difference in adjusting to living in Canada.
So the weather wouldn't bother you, though?
What's that?
The weather wouldn't bother you, though?
Well, the weather in Washington, D.C. is not much worse, although they do have a lot more snow up in Canada. You're absolutely correct. But it is a beautiful country, and I think I would feel very comfortable living there.
Huh. Well, that's pretty cool. I would never actually suspected that one at all, so that's relevant to me. Very new. So you were about to say something, I believe, or you were going to continue on it, or?
Well, if I had a second choice, it would be the Netherlands. And again, because of the people, and I lived there for 4 years, so I'm very comfortable being around the Dutch. And they have a language capability that is just amazing. They not only know their own language, Dutch, but almost every citizen speaks English. Mm-hmm. That helps. Almost every citizen speaks German. A good number of them speak French as well as Spanish. So they are very linguistically acute to the world around us, and they can meet people very easily. So I like them. They're very easygoing, and they're also very free thinking.
Right.
So,
wow, that would be. I guess you would be able to acclimate there very well, as you were saying. They're very open and whatnot, and so you could also be able to travel quite a bit from there too.
And as I said earlier, I like Europe, so yes, it's a good place.
Well, that's always good. I always liked Europe myself when I went over there. So, aside, we know that you went to the military, but what did you always had? What really inspired like the traveling? Because we know you were sent places, but did that you still traveled afterwards? What really was it? What was the moment that inspired you to be like, this is really what I want to do, and this is what I want to pursue?
My parents. Now you might say why? Starting at a very young age. Well, actually, when I was still a baby, they would take me everywhere, and we would go for 6 weeks to the beaches in Florida or to Texas or wherever. And I think in doing those travels, we would play games. Parents play games with the kids in the car. And one of them was, how many states can we find on the license plates? Mm-hmm. And that got me interested in geography, and then of course from that, what is the state capital, what are the mottos of the state. So I became very interested in all the places that were in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And then when I went to Southeast Asia in 1971, that was the introduction to new cultures really opened my eyes. And once again, the Thais are very friendly. It's called the land of smiles. Right. And I just really enjoyed the culture there. And so I thought, well, that's one place, wonder where else there is. And so it was, I guess, from those early experiences that I started traveling. Of course, the military helped.
Oh, yeah, of course. So you would say your very first experience when was your first experience in a foreign country?
It would have been Canada.
Canada.
When we went to Niagara Falls. And I can remember that because I had to be about 4 or 5 years old, and I'm looking at the falls, and I did remark to my mother that somebody is wasting a lot of water. But that's what a young person thinks when he sees falls like Niagara.
That's the first thing I always thought when I seen the Niagara Falls myself. It's just the sheer beauty of the entire falls. It's just maddening. I mean, I know you've seen other falls too that trump the Niagara Falls too.
Well, last year I was down in South America, and on the border between Brazil and Argentina is Iguazu Falls. And it's interesting with Iguazu Falls, the wife of FDR, Eleanor Roosevelt, went down there, and when she saw those falls, her comment was, "Poor Niagara."
Yeah, because that's one of the largest waterfalls, isn't it, in the world?
In fact, for those that have seen the Indiana Jones movie with the crystal skulls, whatever the former title was,
right?
They filmed the falls in that movie there at Iguazu Falls.
Did they? I didn't know that.
And of course, we have right in Kentucky, Cumberland Falls.
Right.
And Cumberland Falls is one of only 2 falls in the world that has a moonbow when there's a full moon.
Now, I knew about the Cumberland Falls and the moonbow, but I did not know that they're one of the only falls.
The other one is Victoria Falls in Africa, but I have not seen that.
Did you ever have any plans to go to Africa, though?
I have been to Africa, but only to Morocco.
So no future plans, though, for this?
I have had future plans, but the situation over there seems to be in turmoil every time I get serious about it.
Right.
And I have decided to go elsewhere. Not that I am fearful of turmoil, because I kind of enjoy going to places that are off the beaten track.
Right.
But until the situation, particularly in the Arab world, settles down, I probably will bypass that.
Yeah, because they always seem more like they have a real hard issue with stability. They're always not just, being a little bit rough on the edges and such, more or less like the whole government's in uproar and everybody is just, there's so much conflict. And
right, especially over the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's very problematic. Hey, speaking of the Middle East, though, you've been there by chance?
I've only landed in Tel Aviv, and that's been my only experience in the Middle East. I have a lot of students that came from the Middle East, and some that Europeans that are now with the various peacekeeping forces in the Middle East. And so I do have people I know that I could visit
Right.
In fact, one person that was just at my house is the Czech attaché to Egypt.
Huh.
So, and he kept saying, you've got to come to Cairo. So, who knows, I may do that.
Right, that sounds like cool. I think Egypt would be really, really cool to see the pyramids and whatnot.
With all the history, yes.
Oh, man, that would be craziness. But, so, for those that are actually listening, like, to this podcast for the interest of traveling and, you know, they don't know exactly where to start, or even, you know, some, you know, seasoned travelers, but needs, you know, some seasoned travelers that may want some extra advice and stuff, what would you provide them in the sense of traveling, those that want to travel? What kind of advice would you give them?
I always enjoy going with the locals. Now, that meant traveling by bus, which can be very interesting at times.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or by train. Also renting a car in a country and having the freedom to go anywhere you want.
Right.
Is something that I would recommend. I have other friends that say, oh no, I'm only going to travel by air. Well,
right.
If you travel by air, you don't see the countryside, you don't meet the people. All you do is see the inside of airports and clouds.
Yeah, that's
so
fun.
It's if you really want to see a country and to experience the good and the bad, I think you need to do it by land.
Right.
And so that would be my recommendation. Also, it takes more time, but if you have the time, it's much more enjoyable and educational and cultural to go by land.
Right, right. And what about people that have this fear of maybe traveling alone? Or you've traveled alone several times, haven't you?
I travel alone most of the time.
Right.
I prefer it.
Right.
By traveling alone, I can make acquaintances. Well, usually where I'm going, I know somebody there in my destination.
Right.
So it's not that I'm arriving in a new city and suddenly, where do I go? What do
Right.
what hotel is available? What's the good side of town versus the bad side of town?
Right.
So I don't have to worry about that. But I prefer traveling alone because that gives me the flexibility to stop, go see things. And if you're traveling with somebody else, unless you know that person very well, they may not have the same interest.
Right.
Now, if you're married, usually you know your spouse's desires, likes and dislikes, and that's a little different. But for single people, you really have to know the person you're traveling with to enjoy a trip.
Right, understandable. Because I've always traveled alone, and I was the type you were saying. I was the one who just spearheaded into traveling, and I never knew really anybody over there. I just kind of was adventuring. I usually had associations with like groups and stuff, but then other travels, I just kind of was like, I just tossed a coin, landed on heads to go, and I just went to the places I was looking at. So for somebody like, what would you recommend, like with food wise, or you know, like trying cuisines, like you know, you kind of like you don't know where to begin, and like what would you? How would you go about choosing random places and stuff?
We were in Ukraine together, right?
Oh, yes.
And if you recall, when we would go to a restaurant, even though I could read some Cyrillic, Ukrainian is not quite the same as Russian.
Right.
And so I could kind of get the idea of, okay, this is a soup and this is the main entree and stuff like that. But many times we would just point at the menu and say, give me this, and have no idea what we were ordering. And that always makes it exciting because sometimes you don't know, even when you get it, you don't know how to eat it.
Right.
But most of the time it turns out to be pretty good. The other thing, if you're talking about food and you're in a restaurant, if the restaurant puts its name on a dish, usually that's what they're most proud of.
Right.
And that would be what I would aim for. If you want to try something that they think is special, if they have their name, the name of the restaurant associated with a dish on the menu, then that's usually a pretty good choice.
Right. All right. See, we learned something already. So like, for people that are a little bit on the, like, they have to be really open to stuff when they travel, do they not? Like, they have to be adaptable because a lot of things happen while you're traveling. You know, you can name every problem in the world that will come up. What was some of the problems that you faced that you feel like you've overcome very well, and then some of the ones you didn't so much?
Well, I guess I've overcome all the problems because I'm here.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But there have been a couple of times I guess the most frustrating was in Spain back in 1987. And I had a car. It was my car. And it was old. It was a Mercedes, but it was old. It did not like going over the Pyrenees. And basically, we barely made it to Zaragoza, Spain. And I took the car into a garage, and it was going to cost me $700 to fix. Well, we were going to be in Madrid for a week.
Right.
And so I made a deal with the guy to fix the car because I had to get back to the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. And we took the train on into Madrid. A week later, we come back, pay the guy $700, and we go approximately 12 miles out of town, and the car dies again.
Oh,
same problem. We get the guy, and he wants another $700. And at that point, the car wasn't worth that much because it was so old, and I was leaving Europe within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
So we decided, okay, I'll leave the car there. He said he would buy it. I never got the money, by the way, but he would buy the car. It's probably still rolling around the roads of Spain with an illegal license plate. But we decided to take the train back.
Right.
And I had tickets on the train. We were going to put the car on the train.
Yeah.
It was an auto train, and take it back to the Netherlands. So we still had the tickets, even though we didn't have a car. And I had to get to Barcelona. The train to Barcelona was at 2 in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning. And so we get up, we get to the train station. There is no one at the ticket window. And when my mother was traveling with me, and we had all our luggage, and when you travel by car, you tend to take more than...
Yeah.
So we really had a lot of stuff. And when the window opened up, all these people rushed to the window. Well, I looked at my watch. There still was plenty of time. When I got to the window, the person behind said, "Closed," and shut the window on me. And we couldn't get on the train. And so we were basically stranded there in Spain. Wow. So that was...
That's stressful.
Yes, and what even made it more stressful, I thought I had insurance for such crises. And this is where it does pay to have someone who knows the language, because I was paying for insurance. I have no idea what I was paying for because it didn't cover crises like that. But
really?
This was supposed to be when your car crumps, they will get it back home.
Right.
And since I had an old car, I thought that's what I had bought. And it turns out that the requirement was I had to come in person to pay for that kind of insurance. Yeah, and they would send me a bill, I would pay it, but I didn't realize that I wasn't paying for the insurance. I was just paying for a subscription or something. Oh, so that was probably the worst experience I had.
That's horrendous.
And it was
now
it was
when
tiresome, but we made it back home.
Right, now looking on it isn't as bad, but I bet at the moment you were just like...
Well, for the next 4 years, every time we had a student from Spain come in, I would get him to write a letter as if he were a member of the police or whatever, saying, "We understand you have this car illegally."
Really?
Yeah, in Spanish.
Right.
But I still never heard from the guy.
Right, yeah, he was like, he's long gone, I don't have to worry about anything. But
however, the car only cost $1,500, and that was in 1983.
True.
And for a Mercedes, $1,500, that was cheap, and I drove it around for 4 years. Right. So it paid for itself.
Yeah, it evened out over time. Well, hey, that's the best way to look at it in those kinds of situations, because otherwise it sucks.
Well, I had we had lots of Germans in our headquarters. And I went up to the Germans one day and I said, "I thought Mercedes were supposed to be good cars." And the Germans said, "They are." And I said, "Well, how come I've had such trouble with this one and I had to abandon it in Spain?" And he says, "How old was this car?" And I said, "Well, it was 15. And he said, and the German replied, "Have you ever seen a German drive a 15-year-old Mercedes?"
Well, that they proved the point there.
They sell them to other countries.
Gotcha. Hey, so Now, I know you were the type that is, you've stayed in hotels, guest houses, and stuff like that, right? Like, did in, there's some places I'm trying to think of right off the top of my head.
Hostels.
Yes, hostels.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Yes, hostels and stuff. Do you have any recommendations on those? Like, what to look for?
They call them youth hostels, but they'll take old people.
Right?
The most fun I had in a youth hostel was in Ljubljana, which is it's the capital of Slovenia. And this youth hostel was in a former prison. And in fact, it was called the Salika, which means cells. And each of the rooms had been renovated by a different architect. And it was very unique. But the rest, the hotel itself, or the youth hostel, was clean, bright and everything, but the rest of the complex was still the old prison.
Oh.
And it was wild. It was just wild, especially on Friday night and Saturday nights. I felt like I was back in the 60s with all the hippies. And I don't know where they came from, because you didn't see these people during the daytime, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. But I would recommend things like that. Hiltons are nice, Marriotts are nice, but they're American.
Right.
I would rather stay in a local hotel that has the flavor of the country.
Right. And more community, like, like in the hostels and stuff, your guest house, some of those you get to stay with other people, so then you're forced to interact with people, and you're forced to build some sort of trust, because you got to overcome some of these, because I know some people, like some people back home that have never ever traveled outside of the country, even in the country, they have this anxiety and fear that something's going to happen to them, or their stuff's going to get taken and stuff. So you have to have this sort of trust already, confidence, and going into it. You got to take risks.
Well, a risk, but usually if it's a hotel, an establishment that's been around for a while, it'll be okay.
Right.
I never really felt uncomfortable in any hotel. In the Soviet Union, I felt we were watched all the time.
Right.
But I didn't think that anything would happen, because they didn't want an embarrassment.
Right.
So, but they had, in the Soviet Union, they had what is called a dozhernia, which means floor lady. And the floor lady would mark every time you came to your room, mark down every time you left your room, who was with you.
Wow.
And basically she worked for the KGB. She reported back to the KGB. Wow. And this hotel was designed for foreigners.
Gotcha. So then, they had an eye on you all the time.
Right. In the Soviet Union, you couldn't go just anywhere. You couldn't just walk into a hotel and say, I want a room. You really had to be approved or set these things up before you got into the country.
Wow. Okay. So, all right, speaking of that, you were talking about setting this stuff in the country. So, what country do you feel like is easier to get into? And not only that, but like if you're like, oh man, I gotta get a place because something happened, or you're coming in real late, but you can usually pop into a place and you can generally get somewhere to stay, easily to jump into.
Germany, they have a wonderful hotel system, and their guest houses are spotlessly clean, most of them, and they're relatively reasonable. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And they, the people are friendly. Now, some places, if it's like 2 a.m, you may have to go to an established hotel versus a guest house. But that's where I would recommend if you were just traveling on your own at the last minute.
Right.
Normally, when I'm traveling, I don't know where I'm going to be stopping every night, except for what is my final destination.
Right.
But like when I drove to Berlin. It was a long trip, and I just stopped and found a place. I had no trouble at all.
Right. And you would, with like planning for a trip and stuff, it's always good, or I think you would maybe recommend that flexibility in your trip. Like you said, you knew you're leaving and you knew your final destination, but nothing really was hard and concrete in between.
I have actually planned that way. What I would do on my calendar is put, okay, this day I'm going to be, say, in Frankfurt, Germany. The next day I'm going to be in 2 days later in Vienna, Austria. Right. Okay, what I'm going to do in between is flexible, and usually it's something that you didn't expect.
Right. Yeah, because I bet you got into a lot of cool adventures and met some really interesting people and tasted a lot of good food.
The other thing that has helped me, of course, knowing people.
Oh.
And I normally, all the places I go, I do let the people know I'm coming. And if they're available, we do things together. But I have never turned down an opportunity to do something that a person from the country I'm visiting has recommended. And some of the times, like, well, we're going to go see this canyon. You know, well, I've seen canyons before, but it would be something totally unique that I didn't expect.
Right.
And so, that's another recommendation for your listeners. If you're visiting somebody, even in the United States, somebody is coming from out of your local area, or you're going to a place out of your local area, and the people you're visiting say, "Well, I would like to take you to see this house."
Right.
I don't want to see a house. Well, you may be missing something truly special.
Right, because it's always unique to the area. You know, you never get another chance to go see it.
That's right.
Always jump on every chance you get to do. So, now the biggest, or I guess you may have answered at some point, but what was it doesn't necessarily have to be, yeah, let's go with it. So what was like the scariest moment where you actually felt, like some sort of, not to degrade another country or anything, but what was the moment you felt like, oh no, am I ever going to be able to go back home or make it back home? Like a frightening moment that you've I
have not had many frightening moments overall. I've had some situations like the train station that we just mentioned in Zaragoza. The scariest moment, I guess, happened in Thailand one time when there was a misunderstanding with the taxi driver that we had, that two of us were going back to where we were staying.
Right.
Two of us were sharing a taxi, but one of us, I was in the hotel that was farthest away, and he was in a hotel that was along the route. And I thought we had negotiated a price for the taxi to take both of us to our destinations. And when the first person got out, he wanted to renegotiate because he thought that he should get a separate fare.
Yeah.
And I got into an argument with him. And this is where knowing the culture paid off for me, because we almost got into a scuffle.
Ooh.
And the reason we almost got into a scuffle, I almost threw the money at him or on the ground.
Right.
Because I was so mad. And as I say, I don't get mad very often.
Right, yeah.
What that would have created was an incident that I have insulted the king, because the king's picture is on the money, and you don't throw the king's picture on the ground.
Right.
And knowing that was part of the culture probably saved me. That we didn't get into a fight, or we didn't, because the Thais can get, when they get insulted, they can get very violent as well, as with any country.
Obviously, yeah.
So that's about the scariest, but it was a case of misunderstanding, and then my feeling, I was also young, my feeling that I was being cheated, which didn't happen very often in Thailand, and I had been there for 2 years at this point, and I thought I knew all the customs and could communicate fairly well. I did speak a little Thai, not much, but a little. Right. And it surprised me.
No doubt about it. Because, like this sort of scenario could happen in America, too. So it's not just, alien to, their cultures.
I think you have more chance of getting into an argument with a taxi driver in the United States than you do overseas.
Oh, yeah, New York for sure. I could see that.
I've had trouble in New York as well.
Oh, yeah, because it's not just, foreign-based. It's just mostly... It's just weird situations that do happen anywhere in the world. So that one was for sure. But, well, Don, that's about all the time we got. But I really wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your busy, busy schedule, because we know you're everywhere. So thank you very much for taking the time to hang out, talk with us, and, enlighten us on your escapades. And hopefully I can convince you to join me again sometime.
Thank you. I would enjoy that.
All right. Well, take care.
Bye.
And with that, we end our interview with Don. He's a pretty chill cat, so hopefully I'll get him on some board. Next time, if you guys have any comments, any suggestions, any questions or anything, now remember, you put them in the comments and I'll be able to ask them, especially if you're interested in traveling and some other advice that he has offered too, and any other stories, because Lord knows he has stories to go on for days. But, with all good things actually, we must come to an end. So, if you guys have been paying attention, be sure to check out my channel, my other podcast, some of my other videos that are video game related, as well as anything related practically in that record. Subscribe if you haven't, and be sure to check out my website, www.cohortco.com, in case you want to see all the latest updates, coolest stuff that I'm coming up with, and some random tidbits that I just throw around every which where. Also, my MGOR, I'll have it down below for all the pictures you see up here and for anything else that might be relatable for, cool stuff like that. The Facebook page, that is updated every day. That always has new and neat, cool little things going on in and out. So be sure to check that out. Give us a like. And also, below I have the song, the title, the link to the to the person that created it. So be sure to go check them out. Give them some credit. Give them a comment, say where you heard it. Always got to support the local groups on the internet. And so, with that, till our next podcast. This one was late, but the next one should be timely. And, as I always love to say, keep it classy and don't be nasty. See ya, guys.